Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Vonda Wright, and we are so excited tonight that you have joined us for the virtual version of Women's Health Conversations. Now, for those of you that are new to us, you may not know that Women's Health Conversations is a nonprofit that we founded almost 10 years ago. I can't believe it's almost been 10 years. We founded it with the knowledge that women make more than 80% of all the healthcare decisions in this country, not only for ourselves, but for everyone we touch, whether it's our family, our coworkers, those we reach out to on social media. And therefore, that puts us in an incredibly powerful place to not only change the health of ourselves, those we love, but ultimately, by changing the health of one woman, we believe we can change the health of her neighborhood, the city, our culture, and frankly, our economy. So we're thrilled to death to have you tonight joining us for the first session of Women's Health Conversations. This year, we've titled this conference The Best of Life, because God knows we have just been through a year, right? Or more than a year now. And this summit falls on the day that the CDC released us almost, right? We no longer have to wear our masks if we've been fully vaccinated. Unless we choose to, we can go outside. It's just been a crazy year where I don't know what you did, but I did a lot of self-reflection. And I also became very, very good at sourdough. So this year has caused so many of us to really think about what the future is. And I was recently asked to describe the best day of my life. And I've had some really great days in my life and some not so great days in my life. But the fact is, I think I've yet to live the best day of my life. I'm living expectantly. And so we have named this summit the Best of Life so that we can reset, so that we can reclaim this year and really plan to roar back into the summer and into 2022. And Women's Health Conversations would not start without the Friday night Hot for Your Health session. And so that's what we've titled this tonight. We're going to talk about the best of relationships, the best of sex, the best of technology that makes relationships and intimacy better. And Women's Health Conversations would also never start without my dear friend and colleague, Natalie Bencivenga. And I'm going to ask her to join us now. Natalie, how are you?
I'm so good. It's so good to see you. I like that we're kind of coordinated and we didn't really mean to do that.
Look, white pearls, black pearls. We are so mindful.
The lips happening and the black top. I'm feeling a vibe tonight, Vonda.
Oh my gosh. You know what? I miss you so much. And
I miss you too.
Everybody in the country is missing each other. And it's really important that we do this.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. I feel like I've been vaccinated now since my birthday, which was mid-April. Right. And the best thing that came out of that was I could hug and kiss my mother.
I saw you post that.
I was like, this. I hadn't realized how much I missed just like holding my mom until I was able, because we've been doing a lot of the elbows and, and so that was like just having that sense of intimacy with the people you love again has been the best thing to come out of this situation.
Absolutely. Yeah. So just so I do you a little more due, Natalie Bencivenga is not only a great friend of mine, she is a licensed social worker who has worked in her therapeutic days with a lot of interesting people and populations, which, you have continued that work with the columns you do, the advice columns you do, really giving people sound advice. And, you're also a journalist and do that both digitally with 5 minutes with, you've been doing all COVID year.
Yeah.
People really need to check that out.
Thank you.
But also print as well as digital media. Yeah. And tonight, Natalie, we're talking about relationships and sexuality and the amazing tech that is being developed really for women, because when you look at biotech, only a very small part of it is being developed for women. And that which is being developed for women is largely surrounding fertility. But there's another 60 years of life we need to evaluate, right?
Yeah, and I think too we get so hung up on sort of youth culture and worshiping this space that we forget that women are so much more than that just aspect of ourselves or that age range of ourselves. And if you're lucky, you age, right? If you're lucky, you get to age. And so I really appreciate you trying to bridge these gaps and have these conversations because, you know, I'm 37 years old. And so I'm entering that phase where it's like, I'm still in childbearing years, but I can also see where the future is going. And so I'm glad that there are women going down this road fearlessly ahead of me so that there can be more conversation and hopefully more advancements in women's health so we can live more comfortable and fulfilling lives at every stage of life.
I'm glad you put it that way, and bringing up the moniker of youth culture, right? Because life doesn't end at 40. In fact, for those of us, you know, I mean, you have done so much in your life. I can't believe you're only 37. And plus, you look 27. But yeah,
Vonda.
um, so many great stuff happens at 40. We had a mini summit leading up to this called 40-ish because it's really when you roll towards 40 and it's a big O birthday, people are like, WTF?
Yeah.
What's the future?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so, you know, that you and I did some research on millennials, and one of the, I thought that was fascinating. And then you wrote a series of blogs, which are up on my website, Dr. Vonda Wright. But what was very interesting coming out of that, and something that women in the generation that we're really focusing on here, 40, 50, 60 plus, need to catch a hold of, is that what the millennials told us is that sex is not just a pleasure zone.
Yeah.
It is policy. It is work, you know, it is circumstance. And so I think we can learn something from the different kinds of relationships and sex conversations that the millennials are having.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think my generation too, we learned from the women that came before us, you know, that there were still there's so much that is still problematic with how we even talk about ourselves and sexuality and how we center ourselves in these conversations. It's not always in this positive or even neutral way. It's still we're still looking at it, I think, within the confines of this culture. And so I think it's important that we listen to younger women and younger people that are talking about how they're viewing it, because what we don't sometimes realize is they're viewing it in relation to how we're experiencing it because they haven't done it yet, right? So especially like my younger girlfriends that are in their early to mid 20s, we have conversations around sexuality all the time because I think it's really important for them to understand that there's nothing to be afraid of because they haven't gone through that yet. And so I look at the women ahead of me and I think, okay, they're getting through it, but how do we now make it easier for each generation to talk about these things and have things actually in place that empower us through policy, like something like paid family leave, right? That is a policy issue that is very much governed by sexuality, but we still haven't connected those dots yet and how that impacts women. And to your point, we have the buying power, we have political power, we have all the power. We need to own that power and make choices that are going to benefit all women of all generations moving forward, which in turn benefits everybody. Hello.
Well, absolutely, because it's not just about I mean, sexuality and relationships seem like just, you know, two people facing each other,
right?
But it's not. It's our individual reflections.
Yes.
It's once again how I view my own sexuality is how I'm teaching my daughters and my children, and it's how, you know, how we talk to our communities, and you know, that's what tonight is about. The three speakers that we're going to have next, that you and I are going to have a panel with later, you know, they're trying to pivot the conversation from, did you know that this was masturbation month?
Right.
To talking about self-care in a different way. You know, Dr. Juliana Hauser, who's going to come up next with us, I mean, that is entirely what her social feeds are about this month. Because she is really trying to normalize conversations that were like sex.
Yep.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
The dichotomy in culture is that we idolize it, we want to talk about it all the time, and yet we don't want to talk about it. And it puts these barriers, right? Isn't that interesting?
It does. And I think that, we look at the way women are viewed in culture, which is women are relational. We're raised to be relational with each other. Our value is found in how we relate to each other. Whereas I don't think we socialize men in the same way. So the idea of masturbating is such a person-focused conversation with yourself that I think women do have a hard time talking about it openly because it's not relational, right? So it's about you and your own experience. And I think that can be very unnerving because we're not socialized like that. And I think it's also important. My generation has really normalized talking about menstruation in a way that, previous generations have just not felt comfortable doing so. And I think when we normalize that conversation around menstruating, we can normalize ways in which we can support women, who are in more vulnerable places that maybe not have access to these products and these situations that can make them feel more empowered. So all of these things are connected, right? All of these things are connected, and talking about them in a way that is normalizing, not positive, just normalizing, I think is really the goal here.
That's right. So that's interesting what you just said, because, no one wanted to talk about their period except in a negative way. And that translates to nobody talking at all about perimenopause.
Right.
Or this whole, because menopause is one day. It's like when your period cuts off. It's an entire decade of time. And I think it's the same thing. We're going to whisper about our periods. We're going to call it all these derogatory things. And then at the same point, we don't even talk about when it stops and everything that changes. So we have a lot to talk about.
Yes, I agree. And it's so funny. It's like, once again, because we focus so much on youth and the idea of when, like you had said to me, when estrogen walks out the door, when your period isn't a thing anymore, I think it's such an issue when it comes to how we identify ourselves as women. And what does it mean to be a woman, right? That is a gender construct. That's something that we decide what that is for each of us. So for me, I think it's really important that we have these conversations around perimenopause and menopause and having a period and all of these things, because what is it that we're actually talking about are these common things that bring us together as women, but also bringing people into that conversation that maybe can't have these experiences, but they still identify as women. I think it's important that we're acknowledging all of the aspects of femininity, which I think is really cool.
That's really cool. Next time you and I plan a live summit, we're going to have, you guys who are new to us don't know this, but we have an entire afternoon breakout on sexuality and this conversation. For 10 years we've had it. So we've been a little bit ahead of the curve. But,
always ahead of the curve. Look at you. You're so ahead of the curve. I can't see you half the time.
I know. Wow, I have missed having conversations with you and other women like us. And so I'm so excited that we're all here tonight. And I want to pivot to our next speaker, who you're going to come back with at the end and interact with her a little bit. But our next speaker is Dr. Juliana Hauser. She is a PhD psychologist and therapist who has individual clients, but she has developed an entire curriculum and coaching as America's sexpert, trying to not only normalize conversations in the way that Natalie and I were talking about, but really helping people have conversations with themselves in a way that doesn't feel hidden. And so I am thrilled, Dr. Hauser, that you are able to come tonight. How are you?
Hi, so good to see you. Thank you so much for including me in this amazing lineup this weekend.
Oh my goodness. I just need all of us to kind of live in the same neighborhood.
Yes.
Run out to the cul-de-sac and see each other all the time. But if we can't, then I'll take this. Although you and I don't live that far apart. So
that's right. Not too far. Yes.
Natalie Bencivenga and I were talking about normalizing conversations around relationships and sexuality, whether it's the psychological part of it, whether it's the physical part, whether it's the anatomy part. And so I'm thrilled that you're going to speak to us first tonight about the best of relationships and your perspective on it. And now, people who are listening live and those who join us over the summer, I want you to go look Dr. Hauser up, and we will be publishing all of her contacts, because sometimes these conversations are hard. And, you know, my mother's listening, and she is not going to believe that I said it's masturbation month out loud.
Great.
We are past the point of hiding our own selves, right? So I'm going to let you take over. I'm so thankful you're here tonight.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, I'm excited to be able to share some of my thoughts. I compiled a list that went from my clients and from the work that I've done of what I consider kind of like the top 5 best relationship and sexuality hacks that I think we need to all have in our life and need to be thinking about on a more regular basis. And as Dr. Wright said, that we need to be having these conversations with other people. So the list is that we're going to talk about the relationship between safety and vulnerability. We're going to talk about communication being up-leveled. We're going to talk about pleasure and fun infusion. Next is going to be about agency and action. And this is one of the, I'm so passionate about this. I can't wait to get to this concept with you all. And then we're going to talk about why I think that understanding and talking about your sexuality is the final frontier of self-development. And I'm hoping I have enough time to give you all also my favorite exercise that I give individuals and couples related to like starting off a conversation about sex with people in your life and for yourself. All right, so if you have a pen and paper, I would love for you to get that now and get ready. And I'm going to ask you first, just on a blank piece of paper, I'm going to give you 3 words, and I want you to think of how, to you, these 3 words work together and put it in a shape on your paper. So the 3 words are safety, vulnerability, and connection. So if you're watching the recording, then I want you to pause and think about it and think about how safety and vulnerability and connection all fit together for you. And if you are live, which I'm excited about, then just real quickly, just kind of don't overthink it. Just what comes to you when you think of how those 3 relate to each other. So when I've done this exercise with people, I have gotten such a wide variety of reactions and shapes. Sometimes it'll be a shape like this, and it'll be safety, then vulnerability leads to connection. Or they'll flip the triangle, that you have to have safety and vulnerability, and connection is the thing that ends it all. I've had people do Venn diagrams, or it's a circle and they all kind of have a cyclical part of things. What is the way that you look at the relationship between these 3? So in general, an idea that you can have is if you look at safety and vulnerability, you can often switch what that third thing is. But you want to really, and that could be like pleasure, it could be letting go. When I'm working with somebody who's pre-orgasmic, we can put like orgasm, having pleasure and orgasm as that third thing. Sometimes it is better communication skills. But you need to have the relationship between safety and vulnerability really intact for yourself. And this is inside and outside of your sexual relationship and your sexual understandings and behaviors. So one of the things that I want you to do also is write a list of what you need in a person and in a situation in order to feel safe. This is a question that when I'm working with couples often, and even with individuals too, when I ask them, like, what do you need to feel safe? What kind of characteristics in a person help you feel safe? That I'm often met with like, right? Like, I don't know. We're not asked that question very often, but it's something that if you're living your best life, I want you to know like that. I want you to be able to recall. I want you to be connecting with yourself so much that you know what you need in a person, in a situation to feel safe, because the relationship between safety and then vulnerability is crucial. Most people, they have to feel safety in the person they're with, the situation that they're in, or safety in themselves in order to get to the place that they are feeling vulnerable. Now, some people may have put you have to feel vulnerable in order to feel safe. That's fine also, but you still need to understand what it is that makes you feel safe about a person in a relationship. The next thing under this category is that I want you to examine, are you the kind of person that pays attention to if you are safe for somebody else? If you are creating safety in a relationship and safety in a conversation or safety in a situation? And are you somebody that checks in with somebody in your life, whether it's a friend or your partner or even people that you're working with, that are, if you need vulnerability in order to get that third thing, connection, or intimacy, are you understanding? Just like we've talked about, most of us have heard the 5 love languages. I think we should also have vulnerability understanding and safety understanding. And that starts with what you know about yourself. Then it goes to the people you're connecting with. And then finally, it's communicating. So we have to, once you've had that self-knowledge, you have to be willing to share that with other people. And it's talking, that's going to go into the next phase too, is know what you need, know how to communicate it, and then make sure that you're in a situation, in a relationship that is meeting your needs in a consistent way. And that when you are saying clearly what you need from a person or a situation in order to feel safe, in order to be vulnerable so that we can connect, then stay out of the relationships that are not providing that in a consistent way, and really feel grateful for the ones that do provide that for you. When I'm working with people as a therapist, it often boils down to one of 3 things that is feeling disconnected in a relationship or a person's life. And Brene Brown has done a beautiful job of making this really in the mainstream, which is feeling wanted, feeling seen, and feeling understood. So when you're having a disconnection in safety and vulnerability or connection, then oftentimes if you go to those 3 things, are you feeling seen? Are you feeling wanted? Are you feeling valued, or are you not? Then hitting at one of those 3 things of like, well, how can I feel more wanted? How can I feel more seen? How can I feel more valued? As well as how can I show the person that I'm talking to that I see them, that I want them, that I value them. And I find those to be top hacks in relationships and living your best life. So that's it about safety and vulnerability. Now we're going to move into up-leveled communication. So when I'm working with couples and they are having a history of having contention or arguments, what we do is, the first thing we do is we talk about the team approach. And sometimes if it's really a couple that's having a hard time, and that could be, I've worked with parents and children, I have worked with siblings, I've worked with married couples or those who are considering to get married, and I've worked with friends. This isn't just romantic relationships or sexual relationships. You want to have a team approach. You want to, sometimes I'll even have people name what their team is, and we'll do it something silly so that we can get out of our heads about what that is like. And think of, we are not at each other, we are together looking at something. And this isn't revolutionary, but if you are finding yourself fighting over the details of things and really at each other, then examine this. Are we a team, and looking at our problems as something that we can solve together and need to solve with ourselves as a team, or are we trying to one up each other? Next is, you need to emotionally regulate and be in charge of yourself in this. And again, this may sound really obvious, but when you look at the details of how you're behaving in your relationships and how you're communicating, oftentimes you hear things like, you're making me so mad, or this, like, you think that the only way to respond to a situation is with this kind of emotionality. Sometimes that is the case, and sometimes we can't help how we respond in a reactive way. But I want you to check in with yourself and remember, you are in charge of regulating your emotions. And there's ways that you can react to the feelings that you have, and that you are in charge of that. And then if you're with somebody else, they're in charge of their own emotions. Also, you're not in charge of their emotions and their emotional regulations. If you feel the need to win in an argument, then I suggest that you win at the most mature award and not getting into the details of exactly what you have to win in that argument. And that can be great. I'll have people say that they'll make a sound and they'll choose what the action is, and they'll say, all right, I'm going to win the most mature award right now. And that will often make them laugh, or it will remind them what we're fighting about, the detail, isn't as important as 1, the team, 2, making sure I'm in charge of my emotions, and 3, let's have a mature discourse. At this age in our life, do we really want to be having knockout dragouts? Do we really want to be having petty things with our friends or our coworkers or in our sexual and romantic relationships? And that's no, we don't. We don't want that. And this is another thing that I do with my clients and that I suggest that my clients do in all relationships in their life. And this is a really good parenting tip too for those who are parents, which is when someone comes to you and are asking for support in a way, then I ask these questions before they begin telling me what it is. Do you want me to be a listener? Do you want me to be a witnesser? Do you want my advice? Do you want my thoughts? And I'm very clear before they get into that detail what my job is when they start talking. The difference between someone who's listening and someone who's witnessing is that in witnessing, you are acknowledging that what they're sharing is vulnerable and sacred. And in listening, you are listening in order to give advice, to give thoughts, or to be a container of that place. Next is pleasure and fun, and I love this. Notice that I'm not talking about happiness being a hack for your best life. What we really need to do is revamp our relationship with pleasure. We have a society that it is often you deprive yourself of pleasure. Like, I can't do this until I've lost this weight, or I have to work, or have busy schedules, and I'm not going to have fun until we go on vacation. Or we overindulge. So we deprive and then we overindulge, and we don't find a balance of pleasure in our day-to-day life and in our day-to-day world and relationships. So learn to ask yourself this question: does this bring me pleasure? Not happiness. Does this bring me pleasure? And ask others. Now, at first, when you start doing this, it does seem a little awkward to ask somebody, does this bring you pleasure? But once you start doing it, and once you start asking yourself, and once you are around people who are mimicking that question, it feels so great to check in and be like, no, no, it doesn't bring me pleasure. I don't want to do this. Or yes, I love this. I love this candle. I love this lettuce. I love the way you're touching me. I love this music. This brings me pleasure. It does, and it does not. And learn to be able to find the balance so that you're not living in the up and down of deprivation or overindulgence. I also want you to think about, this is what Vonda was saying earlier, which is self-pleasure, masturbation. That is a really important part of your life. And I will often ask people, what is your self-pleasure practice? Do you vary it in time of day? Vary it in technique? Do you know and think about how important your self-pleasure exercise is? If you're partnered, is that something that the two of you really value in each other, and create space for you to have privacy and support and seeking self-pleasure in your own way? And one of the reasons why I put pleasure as something really important in living your best life is that we really need to find mindfulness and connectiveness, and that is a really great place in pleasure. When you are seeking pleasure, when you are in touch with what brings you pleasure, you are mindful, and that mindfulness allows connection with yourself, with others, and brings a much different level of contentment in your life. Think about your senses and make sure that you are hitting all of your senses when you're thinking about pleasure. And finally, what kind of fun are you having? What kind of fun are you bringing into your day-to-day life, to your relationships? What kind of fun are you having with yourself? And what kind of fun are you having with other people? It is crucial for you to have a plan for yourself that involves fun and adventure, and that allows you to seek pleasure. And last, it is what I want to talk to you all about. I'm looking at the time. It goes so quickly. I think I have 7 more minutes with you, which is I want to introduce the topic of agency to you. This is the foundation of most of my work within sexuality and sex education. And I think it is the skill that changes everything in your sexual life, in healing things from your past, and celebrating the beautiful parts that you've had already, and then cementing and founding what you really want moving forward. This comes from a lot of research that I've done in looking at what made one person in their sexual history really fulfilled with what they have done in their life, behavior-wise, and relationships they've had, and what makes somebody else really unsatisfied and filled with shame and guilt. And what I found was agency. And with agency, I've looked at like 5 steps of what I think is someone acting in their agency. And it's very similar to decision making and empowerment, but also there's key parts of it that are different. First is that you recognize there's a decision to be made, that you aren't just walking through and letting things just happen to you. You see in a situation that there is a decision to be made. Second is that you feel like you have the ability to make really good decisions, that you have confidence in your decision-making skills. Third is that then you do the decision. You don't just sit around and let other people make decisions for you. You, in action, decide. Now, I used to end it there, and I was like, well, yeah, I mean, that's pretty obvious that's how you make decisions. But I wasn't hitting the points where people were really having shame or guilt or felt really unsatisfied about their life. So I added 4 and 5, which is 4 is that then you learn to live with the intended and unintended consequences of your decisions, especially within your sexual life. And when you're dealing in your sexual world and with other people, there's a lot of unpredictability with other humans. And thusly, there are some things, even if you're a planner and you can really see things clearly, sometimes things go awry. Sometimes going awry is better than you think. Other times it isn't. And what does that mean to you, which is the 5th thing, which is after something perhaps is unintended and negative and a consequence for you, what meaning do you make of that? And that's where resiliency or walling yourself up and going back and deciding, wow, I don't make good decisions. I'm just going to let things happen to me. I don't trust that I know how to do this. And I'm going to defer to other people to decide things in my life. Or I'm resilient. Okay, so that went to hell. Okay, but I do make good decisions. I just didn't foresee this. I know how to adapt and to flex. I can feel hard things and I can move through them and learn from them. And when you understand the concept of agency, it doesn't mean that everything goes right and perfect in your life. What it means is that you can survive it, that you can bounce back, that you can learn from it, and that you don't internalize the negative things into something bad about you. And you'd be surprised how often that comes up into our sexual journey and our sexual life. I'll end this also with, I really urge you to, when you're going through the rest of this conversation and this beautiful conference that we're having this weekend, consider that your sexuality is holistic, that it is desire, it is pleasure, it's health and reproduction, it is sexualization, it is identity, it's so many things beyond who you're attracted to and what you do with your body. Look at your sexuality in a holistic way and know that it really is such an important thing to put a lot of time and effort into reflecting on. And that, to me, I consider like the final frontier of self-development is looking at who you are as a sexual being and understanding that your sexuality is the essence and core of who you are. So it's worth taking the time to understand who you've been up until this point and where you want to go moving forward. I want to share as my last time is, here is my favorite exercise to give individuals and couples. And it goes like this. You make a list of sexual behaviors, everything from like kissing your hand and snuggling to the wildest, craziest thing you've ever heard of. And you may not even know the definition of it, but you heard this word. You want the whole variety of behaviors to choose from. And then you take a piece of paper and you put it into 4 quadrants. One quadrant says things I have done that I would like to do again sexually. Sex acts that I have done that I don't want to do again. Sex acts that I haven't done, but I think I want to try again. And sex acts that I haven't done that I don't think at this point that I'm going to be trying. And then you start filling in those quadrants. What is wonderful about this is agency in action. This is you making a decision. And just for right now, do I want this? Do I not? Is this a yes or a no? Is this a yuck or is this a yum in my life? And if you are single or not active with somebody else, then that list is something that you can work with and check in with and know that it may change. And in fact, it will change. I've done mine like a couple times a year for many years. And it is surprising how some things I'm like, I can't wait to do this again. And like, nope, a couple of years later, like, I'm done, don't need to do that again. Or I thought I would never do and I can't wait to do. it varies as you change, as you grow, if you've had new experiences, and as you relate to other people. If you're a partner with somebody, your partner can do this exercise and you all can go through it and learn a lot about each other along the way. It's a beautiful exercise of vulnerability, especially if you create an exercise, an environment of safety before you go into it. And this can be a beautiful way, if your partner, to risk take, to learn more about each other, to also just check in with, maybe we want to try this. Do you want to try this? Okay, we're going to put this on our couples list. Or I think I don't want to try this anymore. Can we check in about changing this in our relationships or moving forward? And you can make wish lists. If you're single, I think these may be things that I want to try in my life and not try, but it's a beautiful and safe exercise to begin agency in action. I love that Dr. Wright has really put a value in who we are as a sexual being, and I love that this is going to be infused throughout tonight and that I'll be seeing you in a panel soon. I really have seen the value in my own life in prioritizing, looking at what my sexuality is and how it's changed, and finding the bravery to look at how all the little pieces have filled together in order to make up who I am and inform who I am. And that I can sit here with that self-knowledge and decide what I want my sexual life to be like moving forward. And how do I keep people in my life or find new people in my life that are going to support that, support who I am in my agency and support who I am in growing forward. And I would love to hear how you do that moving forward too. Hello.
Hi, it is so nice to meet you, Dr. Hauser. I'm Natalie Bencivenga, and before I ask you my question, I'm just obsessed with the wallpaper behind you.
Thank you.
It's amazing. And I really love the conversation that you just had with everyone, especially with I put it as a triangle myself, which I thought was really cool that so many people did it in so many different ways. But you were talking a lot about pleasure, and I really appreciated the way you were framing that conversation. Do you think there's a difference between pleasure and happiness?
Absolutely. There is a big difference. And what I think is that we think that that happiness is something that you just achieve and there it is, and we know exactly how to identify it. Mm-hmm. But that's not the case. Really what it is, there's just continuum of it. So when we look at the difference between pleasure, I think we actually find a better mindfulness with our pleasure than we do happiness. That there's a groundedness in pleasure that happiness doesn't have. And I think we've put so much stuff onto what happiness is and don't understand pleasure, that when you start looking at a new relationship with pleasure, there's a lot less to sift through, and we can find a better relationship with it than we can with happiness.
No, I appreciate your thoughts on that. And I know we've just a couple of minutes, but I couldn't help but think there was this Kevin Bacon quote that I heard a long time ago, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it. So Kevin Bacon apparently once said, because they asked about how he had such a great relationship with Kira Sedgwick for so long. And he said, well, the key is we keep the fights clean and the sex dirty. And I'm just dying to know what you think of that sort of a relationship philosophy.
I love that. And I've never heard that. So that's brilliant. I'm going to start adding that to everything. I believe in that completely, because you don't want to fight dirty. You want to fight clean, which we were talking about in the communication earlier. And yes, let's have some fun in the bedroom and in our sexual connections with others. That's brilliant. Love it.
Awesome. Well, I'm so honored to have you here and to have all of you. And I can't wait to talk further with the panel and have you involved in that as well. Hi, Dr. Wright.
Hi, Dr. Wright.
Dr. Hauser, thank you so much.
Hi.
You know what? Every time I hear you, I'm like taking notes.
Oh, great.
Started speaking more freely, like saying words my mother is listening. But you know what? It's what we should do. And I'm so thankful for you.
So, thank you so much. Thank you for valuing this and bringing me on too. I can't wait to see you all later tonight.
Okay, I'll see you in a little bit. So I hope you all loved that as much as I do. And I hope you took a ton of notes, and we're going to have a chance to come back and interact together. But right now I want to briefly introduce another amazing person whom has only been in my life maybe 6 months. Dr. Kelly Casperson is a urologist, which, like orthopedic surgery, doesn't have that many women. But she has totally taken charge of an area of urology that there weren't many people talking about. So she's not only a practicing urologist, does surgery all the time. You should find her on Instagram. She comes on and she answers your questions. People write her, she writes it on a sticky note, and then she spends time answering your questions because she believes that you are not broken. And so you must go listen to her. And she's also, on top of that, a life coach. Dr. Casperson, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
You know what? I've really come to love your energy and your spirit and the truth that you tell every day in the very frank way you do it. There is no, sometimes talking about body parts and naming names of this is actually the name of this body part, or the feelings that feel around it. I mean, it's still so whispered. And I just really appreciate you saying, not on my watch. We are going to appreciate all of ourselves. So I'm thrilled that you're here. I can't wait to hear what you're going to say. And then I'll pop back in when you're done.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, thanks for having me. Those are really kind words. So let's see if I can share a screen with you and get a little bit of PowerPoint. So we'll see. Let me know if I'm failing horribly. Can you guys see me and see my screen right now? Are you looking at a PowerPoint? Or are you looking at me? I'm not hearing anything, so I'll come back on. There you go, guys. So hopefully you're seeing a PowerPoint right now. I'm just going to check back on. Okay, looking at you. Well, let's see, Megan. PowerPoint's on. Okay. And let us go through that. I'll do my very best trying to do this PowerPoint with you guys then. Okay, Best of Light Summit. I am Dr. Casperson, and I'm a urologist, and I'm so excited to be here. So I got into this. I've been a urologist outside of residency now for about 9 years. And I had a woman crying in my office. She had bladder cancer. We cured her from her bladder cancer. And she was crying in my office because she was devastated about lack of sexual desire. Very happy marriage, loved her husband, had no sexual desire, and was feeling very broken by it. And I had no idea how to help her. So I went deep dive into female sexual medicine, went from my belief that nobody knows, because I was actually taught in residency that it's complicated. We're complicated. We don't know how. We might never ever learn. And turns out it's simply not true. We know tons about female sexual desire dysfunction, how we work. We just live in a society that's so male-centric. We don't get taught about the women's side of things. And finally, we have to deal with the people who are sleeping with the people who are taking the Viagra. So we need to care about the women. So my purpose now is connecting people with education, accurate, sexual pleasure-based education, not the fear-based sex education that if we were even lucky to get it when we were growing up. Only 18 states require medically accurate sex education, and 0 states talk about pleasure as far as sex education goes. So what they call sex positive, right? Sex is awkward. It's uncomfortable to talk about. I think I do my best to make it not awkward and talk about it like the weather. And then realizing that improving your sex life, we want to increase our communication and our ability to talk to our partner. But that conversation, I would suggest, is where the connection comes from. Actually talking about your sex life, working together to improve your sex life is where that connection comes from. Yes, bonus points, what you're doing in the bedroom is more fun, but the connection really is in the communication and talking about it. First things first, the number one reason that women feel like they're broken is because we are taught, because of Hollywood and society, that we just need to be walking around like 18-year-old males desiring sex all the time, what we call spontaneous desire. And I've got some books in this slideshow if you guys want to take notes and read some more books. Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski is amazing, really breaking down that spontaneous desire in women as we age, especially if we're in committed long-term relationships, is not the norm. It's actually an option. There are some women who have spontaneous sexual desire throughout their entire lifespan, but that's not the majority. You're not broken if you don't have it. You might have it when you're younger and have a lot higher testosterone, and you're not in a committed long-term relationship, right? It's kind of a trade-off with monogamy. things that are known, our brain does not think is novel, we don't seek out, right? So it's a kind of a trade-off in a long-term relationship. Instead, the majority of these women have what we call responsive or receptive desire, meaning I'm not going around looking for sex, but once I'm in the moment, once I'm talking and hanging out and touching with my partner, the desire naturally arises, what we call responsive desire. And it's a very normal part of female sexual function. So you are absolutely not broken, rule number one, if you have responsive or receptive desire. How many women say, I don't really feel like having sex, and they feel so broken about it. But when they have sex, they're like, that was great. I just forgot how great it was. That is totally normal. We just have to remember that we got to get to the party to enjoy the party, and just kind of waiting around desiring to go to the party isn't what is working for a lot of people. Another big thing that women feel broken about, they feel broken about this low sexual desire, or what we call desire mismatch. And they feel like they're broken because they have the lower sexual desire. Well, here's the news alert that everybody has to know. Whenever you have two people in a relationship, they desire different things. Some people like sweet, some people like salty, some people like running, some people like tennis. You put two people in a room, they have different preferences for things. Same thing with sex. And by the way, what exactly is a low desire, right? How many times a week is called low desire? So we're constantly comparing ourselves to what we think we should do, and shoulding all over your sex life is actually horrible for your sex life. I'm coming out with a book. It's coming out the holidays. It's called You Are Not Broken. Stop shoulding all over your sex life. Because women just add the unnecessary beating themselves up on top of a sexual life and actual sexual function. So knock it off. There's completely normal couples that have desire mismatch. It is the job of the couple to meet in the middle and make it so everybody is, if not completely happy, a compromise, right? Lowering it down to the lowest or rising it to the highest might not be the most successful approach. Talking about it, compromising. It is not the low desire person's job to reach the level of the high desire person. That will change so many people who think that they're broken. It's incredibly, incredibly important. Okay, so let us continue on. Orgasm inequality, incredibly common. Heterosexual women in heterosexual relationships, so a woman paired with a man, the heterosexual woman is having the least amount of orgasms of anybody on the planet in a sexual relationship, meaning in same-sex couples, men, women, they're all having more orgasms. The heterosexual man has a high amount of orgasms. Everybody's having more orgasms than the heterosexual woman. It's what we call orgasm inequality. And so if we prioritize male sex, if we call sex, the definition of sex, if we keep it so narrow that it starts when something goes in the vagina and it ends when a male ejaculates, that's not enough. We're not celebrating what a woman needs in order to have an orgasm. Women are feeling broken because they're not having orgasms from putting something in their vagina. In a couple of slides, I'll demonstrate that's not actually where our orgasms come from. Until we expand our view of what sex is and we start prioritizing women and men, both in a heterosexual couple, we will continue to have orgasm inequality. So here's melted ice cream. I love this metaphor. I love ice cream, but I will not eat melted ice cream. You can't make me like it. So does a woman actually have low desire, or is she having boring or bad sex? Bad sex, I think bad sex is having painful sex, right? That's bad sex. Sex should never be painful. See a doctor for that. And then boring sex is it's the same thing over and over. It's prioritizing his orgasm. It's done when he's done. And if I got mine, I'm lucky. And if I didn't, I didn't. That's boring sex. What we know from data is women need more, thoughts, adventure, variation, whatever you want to call it. Women are bored in bed. That's not their fault. They're not broken because the exact same thing doesn't feel good every single darn time. It's just called boring. Until we start prioritizing both people in that relationship, I'm not surprised when she doesn't really seek out or desire sex. It's melted ice cream for her. So another key for female sexual function, you don't get any awards for multitasking. We think we do, right? We're running a business. We've got an employer. We've got kids. We've got a spouse. We've got to keep our fitness up. We have to eat 8 fruits and vegetables a day. We're always kind of trying to do all these things. Orgasms don't live there. Orgasms don't live in our frontal lobe, right? We really have to work at turning off the multitasking. We also have to work on tuning out or tuning off the future and the past, because orgasms don't live there. When you're in the bedroom, tuning into what's happening inside your body. inside your body, and in the kind of the hindbrain is where that orgasm lives, not in the frontal brain. The other thing we know that is really inhibiting for orgasms for women is what we call spectatoring. So a woman is kind of watching herself have sex, right? Oh, are my thighs jiggling? Is his erection going to work well enough? Oh, am I going to have an orgasm this time? I don't know. That's called spectatoring. That's your brain watching you having sex. Orgasms do not live there. You have to say, and working on that mindfulness of, there's my thought. There it is, loving kindness. It gets to go. Focus back on the pelvis, focus back on the clitoris. This is a skill that can be taught. We aren't taught it, but it can be taught. And in women who come into researchers or clinics and they say they have low sexual desire, when they're given a mindfulness-based practice of focusing on pleasure, of focusing on what feels good, their orgasms, their pleasure, their joy returns. So real quick on the hardware, the clitoris is the only organ in the entire body in any gender that is solely designed for pleasure. What about the penis, you say? Well, the penis has to urinate and the penis has to ejaculate. It actually has 3 jobs, pleasure being one of the 3. Clitoris is the only organ in any body designed solely for pleasure, and we are carrying it around with us 24 hours a day. It's amazing. Here's the thing, clitoris is not the vagina. When we put things in the vagina, we don't always have orgasms. Vagina is very useful for many things. It gets menstrual blood out, it gets babies out, it allows sperm in to have babies. Orgasm is not the vagina's job. When we limit our view to heterosexual paradigm of kind of male-focused sex, we think the vagina is where the orgasms come from. We feel broken when we don't have orgasms with penis and vagina sex. What we know from the studies, only 20% of women have orgasms with penis and vagina sex. So you have to pay attention to the clitoris. The clitoris actually, the tip of the iceberg, kind of the glands, is on the only part you can see on the outside. It wrapped in and under the labia. The labia minora and the labia majora are sexual organs. Massaging that, stretching that, playing with that creates arousal, creates blood flow, leads to better orgasm. If you don't allow for blood flow and arousal, we don't wonder where the orgasm comes from. We have to pay attention to all of her erectile tissue. Women have almost as much erectile tissue in their pelvis as a man does. It's just located in different spots, and we don't always access it with a penis. The other thing about a penis is it's always not the greatest tool for us. So vibrators, which we'll talk about, femtech, it's amazing, work very, very well. Hands, oral sex, all the things we need to have an orgasm. Don't feel broken when there's one tool that the man owns that works for him, but it doesn't work for us to have orgasms. Totally normal. So let's talk quick. I can't do a doctor talk without talking about medications. This is always my talk to women in clinic. Vaginal estrogen, perimenopause, postmenopause, and the decades after, it's like sunscreens and safety belts. If you want healthy teeth, you go to the dentist. If you want a healthy vagina, you use vaginal estrogen. After menopause, our estrogen goes down to, let's call it 0. And we get dryness, tightness, tearing, pain. So many women stop having sex because of low estrogen. You don't have to. Vaginal estrogen is incredibly safe. There is 0 risk of cancer. Don't confuse vaginal estrogen with systemic estrogen. They're 2 very different products, and it's just healthy maintenance. If you want to go out in the sun, you wear sunscreen. If you want to be sexually active, even for women who aren't sexually active, it decreases the risk of urinary tract infections, decreases the risk of overactive bladder, really helps just with that dryness, sensitivity that can happen even if we're not even having sex. Okay. Also a role for estrogen and testosterone. Sometimes we can kind of get fancy with medications when you actually go see a sex med doctor. And the vagina is a self-cleaning oven. I don't want any soaps. I don't want any douches. I don't want any products with anything in it except for lubrication with sexual activity to go in the vagina. Caveat, you can now buy products that are hormone-free, that have hyaluronic acid in it, that can help moisturize a dry vagina post-menopause. But other than that, we don't need our vagina to smell like flowers. That's not its job. It's a self-cleaning oven. Real quick, to talk about menopause is that estrogen is very important. But a woman who chooses not to use estrogen after menopause, they've done studies, she can have as equally good of a sex life. There is a role for testosterone supplementation. A lot of women don't think of testosterone as a hormone that we have, but it also goes down. And there is a role for testosterone supplementation. Again, not FDA approved, it's all off label, but there is some data for some women that their sex drive goes up. But remember, the biggest sex organ in your body is your brain. And the way we're trained to think about sex if we think we're worthy of sex, if we think sex is for us to enjoy and have pleasure, that's where that desire comes from. If you still need to clean up those thoughts and just slap some testosterone on, it's not going to work. The mind is absolutely number one. Testosterone is just a little bit extra for some people. So remember, you are not broken. If anything is broken, it's a system. Lack of sex education, the way we think about desire and our expectations. And you are lovely. So I ran through that fast because my favorite part is the panel and questions and answers, and I just can't wait to get to it. So here we go.
Kelly, I cannot get enough of you. And in fact, Natalie and I have been texting back and forth. And this book, you know, I sure hope the publishers let you keep that name. Quit shitting on your sex life. Because you know what? I think the reason that your messaging has taken off is that you, like I said before, you're not whispering. You're just stating the facts, because at least my generation of women, you're younger than me, but I think my generation of women were you know, even though we were born in the 60s when there was peace, love, and sex and everything, but that's not how then the daughters of that generation were raised. If we were raised that way, we would know what happens to us in perimenopause, right? So I just appreciate, I think I've said it a lot of times, you're taking this on and speaking publicly. And I want to talk for 2 seconds about what needs to happen, because we talk a lot, we aim this at women, but this is kind of a man's problem too, right?
100%.
I mean, I'm married to a man who's older than me, and I'm postmenopausal, and I think there's an entire education that has to happen with our partners if they're men, with our partners, period, right? We can figure it out if we're, you know, I've said it 3 times now. Sorry, Mom, it is masturbation month. But if we have a partner and they're male, they need an education too. If you had to open that conversation or tell a guy 3 things, because their minds are going to be blown, prioritize for the women listening, what you need to tell them first.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you completely, but I always give kindness to the man, right? If we shouldn't should on our sex life, we shouldn't should on what they should know. And they didn't get any secret education
We shouldn't should
on the man.
We shouldn't say, you should have known this. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, well, so many women give away their power, right? He doesn't give me an orgasm. It's like it's not his job to give you an orgasm. It's your job to know how orgasms happen in you and then bring him along, have him play with you. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of women give away their power when they're like, well, I just saw an orgasm because like he doesn't really give me an orgasm. It's like, he didn't go to a secret school like to learn this, right? So they don't know any more than us. They don't even have our body parts, right?
Well,
so
you know, and I'm a sports doc, and I will tell you what men talk about in locker rooms, and it's not knowing anatomy, actually. So talking about anatomy, how do you recommend, other than looking in a book, which, you know, frankly, my husband makes fun of me. I went to Barnes and Noble and read a lot of books about a lot of stuff I didn't know about when it came to preparing to be in marriage. But women need to know their own anatomy. Women don't know that the clitoris is external and then dives under the labia. Maybe you have 2 or 3 sets and that they disappear once your estrogen does. What do you advise your patients in terms of figuring out their own anatomy?
Yeah. Well, I don't even call it masturbation because I think it's such a loaded term. I call it self-cultivation. I read it in a book, so I can't claim anything for that. It's like self-cultivation is just learning, hey, this feels good. This doesn't feel good. When I feel really turned on, this is what I like. A Women's Anatomy of Arousal is another book that's really good and really has a lot of anatomy and goes into kind of empowering women. The most important thing is that if we don't pay attention to the clitoris, which is the organ of pleasure, we probably won't have orgasms like we could, right? Some women do have orgasms with penis and vagina sex, or they call PIV sex. Good for you. That's fantastic, but that's not the normal for women. And here we go around feeling so broken because we think our anatomy should be different than it is. We just haven't learned it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another thing, we're going to come back and talk about all of this in the panel, but one more question I want to ask you while I have you here on stage is, you know, vaginal, and even labial, our whole pelvic anatomy changes so much after we have children. Even after one child, we don't have to have 6 children for everything to be disoriented. Is that permanent? Is there nothing we can do? How do we get a semblance of what it was before we pushed a 9-pound child out of our pelvis? I mean, what is your advice as a urologist? How do we deal with that?
Well, 2 things can happen, and I see it all the time, every day in my clinic. Things can either become too loose or things can become too tight. If things are too tight, it tends to be painful, right? Muscles can get tight, just like your shoulder gets tight or your quadriceps get tight, your pelvic muscles can get tight. There is a lot of pain and trouble with penetration that happens with that. Pelvic floor physical therapy is a thing, and that's a great treatment for it. The other thing that can happen is things get too loose. Big babies can loosen ligaments. Our muscles get kind of worn out and stretched from carrying the baby. And also, just as women age, we lose muscle mass, especially if we're not being active or, keeping our hormones where they were premenopausal. So if it's too loose, you can go to pelvic floor physical therapy to work on strengthening it. But the thing I think is the most damaging, again, is the biggest sex organ is your brain. If you think something's wrong with you because you had a baby, or you think things aren't right, or the other thing, spectatoring, right? If you think he's not enjoying it because you had a baby and maybe it feels too loose, that's where everything gets all tricky. And it's completely an unnecessary worrying. Most guys can't tell.
Oh, put that on a billboard. All right. Well, Dr. Casperson, I love having you here. I'm going to have us pop off and have a really interesting and problem-solving person come on right now for a brief conversation before we all return back to our panel. So thank you so much. I will see you momentarily. So, you know what? We've been talking with Dr. Hauser about relationship and some tools that she has had to help couples identify with each other and talk. We've talked with Dr. Casperson about a variety of ways that we are not broken and normalizing conversations about something that's really normal. But sometimes, especially, as I like to put it, when estrogen walks out the door, we need to be very creative and resourceful in figuring out how to take care of our intimate skin. And so I'm going to bring on Jerry DiPiano, who is the CEO of FemPharma, which you should look that up. Hi, how are you, Jerry?
I'm well. How are you, Vonda?
Good. I am so glad you could join us. And so we've had these great conversations with Dr. Hauser, who's a clinical psychologist, with Dr. Casperson, who is a urologist, all about relationships and sexuality. But I thought it was really important to have you on today because our majority of our demographic is 40, 50, 60 and beyond. And literally when estrogen walks out the door, we need to take care of a hugely neglected surface area of skin. We're all talking about our faces, 12 square inches of skin. Until you and people like you came along, we were not talking about our intimate skin. So FemPharma, and I'll let you describe it a little bit, is really an amazing company addressing the intimate skin. And listen, I've ordered from you guys, and here's the amazing, beautiful packaging you send and the instructions really teaching us about our bodies. So tell us a little bit about FemPharma and the mission and why intimate skin has to be paid attention to.
Absolutely. So I am not new to women's healthcare, and I spent the first part of my career in multinational pharmaceutical companies. Right. And that's where I learned that to a large extent, we were confining, that is, Big Pharma confined most of its work to looking at contraception and hormone replacement therapy, which are important options for women. But it doesn't begin to describe some of the diseases and disorders that disproportionately affect women. And yet at the same time, when we started to move in the right direction, which was to say that we were looking at areas beyond just the pelvic and reproductive disorders. We were looking at developing products that were largely systemically absorbed, but didn't really attack the region without the complication of systemic absorption. So this is my third company. FemPharma Consumer Healthcare is the third company. My first company was sold to a public company. The second company is still in existence, and we have a prescription sister company that has assets that are in clinical phase 3 in areas like fibrocystic breast condition and overactive bladder and endometriosis, all really important areas that are prescription. But really where we saw a deficit was for women who were over the age of 40 and became invisible, which is really sad because let's think about it. Those same women are making 85% of the healthcare decisions and represent $20 trillion in our economics. So these are women who don't necessarily want or need something that is a prescription product, but they want to address the individual symptoms of menopause. And that's where FemPharma Consumer Healthcare was born. We were born out of the understanding that not every woman needs or wants a prescription and is looking for a better option. Now, I will say that we spent a lot of years getting patents issued and developing drug delivery technology so that we delivered targeted regional delivery. Very low amounts of product, very targeted to the region of disease or disorder or symptom without the consequence of systemic absorption. Why would you not want that? And when we developed the first series of products, which are for vaginal and vulvar dryness, it was keeping that technology and know-how in mind so that we could address this very important symptom, which is that women will see a decline in estrogen and their vulvar and vaginal tissues may become dry and they need to ameliorate those symptoms. So the products that we have developed really address that without the consequence of high degrees of systemic absorption. They're non-hormonal. And by the way, we thought about the aesthetics because remember, we've spent 20 years doing research, not just clinical research, but research, market research with women. So we asked them what they wanted, and they actually told us what we needed to deliver. And that really became the series of products that I believe you have ordered from us. But really, this is a serious issue for not just women over the age of 40, but we ought to be teaching our daughters about vaginal and vulvar health even as prepubescence.
You know, I'm glad you said that because when we have our discussion, I'm going to frame it around the talk. We may or may not get a talk at Menarche when we start our periods, but we need to develop so that's what we're going to do in our panel. But you know what? I love all the points you made about you were very careful in design. No woman wants to walk around with stuff dripping out because it's poorly designed, and more is not, or less truly is more. And you've given thought to all of that. And something that I really think the analogy is, tomorrow we're having a panel on ageless beauty and the complicated regimens that we go through for this skin, right? With this cleanser and this moisturizer and this whatever, there's so many products. But I think in talking to you previously, your point is that this is not, the products you make are not just for sexuality. Like, for instance, I'm going to show people, this is one of the Satisfemme buds that you produce, right? It's tiny amounts. It goes internally, but versus this intimate skin moisturizer, this is daily maintenance of the skin, because what those of you who haven't lived through it is that when estrogen walks out the door, it becomes a Sahara desert in a place where it was never like that, right? And so what your company is saying is that we have to invest in ourselves every day and not just expect that our body's going to remember what it was like before estrogen left, right?
Absolutely. And remembering that your vagina and vulva are tissue or mucosal surfaces. And if they are not intact, they become the entry points for bacteria and infection. So what you want to do is you want to think about this as you just described. This is skin, but it's actually skin that is more vulnerable if it is not protected to insult. And so when you think about it, let's go back and look at women who are in puberty and they're using tampons, right? They might be using toys. They may be masturbating or self-pleasuring. I love Dr. Casperson's term, and I'll have to use that and coin that. But let's face it, it creates friction. It can create abrasions. It can create tears. So we really should be getting in the habit of doing the moisturization of our vulvas and vaginas every single day. And then, of course, as we enter our perimenopausal and menopausal years, it becomes even more important that we think about this as a routine, that we think about this as a regimen of self-care. And yes, it will definitely make intimacy more pleasurable, not because it's enhancing what we would think about from a psychological perspective, but if your tissues are healthy and if you have moisturization and you maintain this regimen, when you are ready for that sweet caress, it's really much nicer when your tissues are feeling very healthy and intact.
Now, I know that some of the formulations are proprietary, but I want people to understand that what goes into the products that you make. I mean, it's not a bunch of chemicals. Give us an idea of the non-proprietary things what is this stuff? And some of the words are going to be very familiar to people who take care of their skin on their face.
So one of the key ingredients is hyaluronic acid, which is really holds about 1,000 times its weight in water. Mm-hmm. And we find it naturally occurring in the body. One of the other ingredients is vitamin E. And that we also understand is a powerhouse, and it again helps with moisturization. There are some other proprietary ingredients in specific proportions that lend some of the physical characteristics to the product so that it's not leaky, drippy, or messy. And we use a very small volume. One of the characteristics of this product that you can appreciate is that when you are using it, and we have an intravaginal product, which is a personal lubricant and vaginal moisturizer, which was cleared by the FDA as a 510K Class 2 medical device. And that's the personal lubricant and moisturizer. And you literally, the amount of material that is inserted into the vagina using a pre-filled applicator is quite small, and it actually adheres to your mucosal tissue and does not leak out. So if you're ready to have intercourse and you're using the product, what you will observe is that you're not going to find your sheets all wet. You don't have to wait an hour for anything to melt. So unlike some of the other products that we see available, this is not our product. Our product is ready you are on the go using any one of our products. So when the moment arises, you're ready.
You know, I first became acquainted with you because I was doing research on biotech. I consult with biotech. I formed this little company called One Red Arrow with another one of our speakers, Lynn Banaszak, who's speaking on Sunday. But in One Red Arrow, we help companies go from idea to execution. And as I was doing research, I realized that there are billions of dollars being spent and invested by VC on biotech in general, a very tiny amount on femtech, and even less on FemAging products, because not every need of a woman has to do with fertility, but that is what most of the biotech has surrounded. And I understand that, actually. However, if we have 3.8 billion women in the world and more than 40% of us are 40 and above, it is not right that only $400 million is being invested in FemAging products such as what you're developing. And, honestly, I could probably name just 20 companies that are focusing on women in this demographic, right? So you're kind of a lonely gal out in the FemAging world,
We call ourselves trailblazers. And
That's right.
we also refer to this as a tsunami. So think about it this way. 1 billion women will be in menopause by 2025.
Yeah.
Those same women will control about $20 trillion of economic value. So we are seeing an emergence of company, which is absolutely wonderful in this space, focusing on women who are over 40, because that is the generation that is demanding better products.
That's right. Well, that is one of the reasons that Women's Health Conversations has always focused on 40, 50, 60. And it's not because, frankly, it's because that's the demographic I was in and that's the people I knew. And it's not because we don't care about the millennials, but we have been invisible. And yet those numbers are powerful. 1 billion women controlling $20 trillion. I mean, I'm glad that we are all now raising our voices to help design and put words to what our generation needs, actually. So I'm thrilled to death. I think what I want to do now is have Juliana and Kelly brought back up so we can actually design the talk that, each one of us can put forward a few, what do women entering into perimenopausal 40, 50s and postmenopausal, what must we know? What can we not ignore? So I'll wait for Juliana to come back up if she's still here. And Natalie. There's Natalie. Gosh, I love having you all here.
I have to say that my vulva and vagina are going to write all of you ladies thank you notes later because I feel like I'm learning so much. I'm so excited about this conversation. I can't even. This is so amazing. Seriously.
Natalie told us earlier that she's 37. So we are designing this talk for you, right? So, I'm
learning. I'm this is amazing.
I say it tongue in cheek, but I never got a talk when I was a teenager. And my mother says that's because I wouldn't listen, but I should have listened because I'm listening now. But we talk about explaining to kids what's going to happen. But if we're designing the talk for 40, 50, and 60, just tell me 3 things if we're going to prioritize as the millennials now, the oldest millennials are turning 40, that turned 40 this year. And so I don't even know if you're 40, Kelly, I doubt it. But what are the first 3 things they need to seek out, know about themselves, don't be taken by surprise if we're designing the talk?
Oh man, just 3, huh? Okay.
Well, we have 20 minutes, so we can talk as long as we want.
I'm over 40 for what it's worth.
Oh,
I'm a very proud Gen X. Let's see. The clitoris is the source of your pleasure. Men don't give you orgasms. You're not broken if you have desire discrepancy. Lube is your friend. Lube is mandatory. And then if you don't use it, you will lose it, right? It's kind of like sex is a lot like exercise, okay? They're both very important. But it's you can't sit around waiting for motivation to exercise. It's not going to come. And if you actually talk to the exercise experts, the super fit people, they don't have motivation to exercise either, right? Extrapolate everything I'm saying to sex, but you just say, exercise is important in my life. Sex is important in my relationship. I'm going to prioritize that in my life. But if you wait around for the desire to spontaneously arise, that's not how it works. And we've been fed a bunch of baloney from Hollywood and the crappy sex education that everybody got in 3rd grade, right? So we really have to think about it in a different way, kind of like eating right, exercising, prioritizing sex in your life.
You know, I love that analogy because you're right. Very few people are jumping around wanting to go exercise. You know, in fact, I've been trying to be better since I became a sourdough expert during COVID and the resultant 10-ish pounds that gave me. And I've been trying to be better about this exercise thing. But to your point, Kelly, I mean, I've written a few books about exercise. But Kelly, if I don't schedule it, if I don't haul myself out of bed to get to my 5 a.m. exercise class, it doesn't happen. And you have made the point many times, you have to schedule it.
Yep.
You know,
and people get so moany about it, but what did we do when we were 20? We scheduled sex, right? It wasn't available until Friday night. Maybe it was going to happen, but that was when it was going to happen. We've always scheduled sex. And then we made it completely available by cohabitating with somebody, and it completely falls off the radar because you're not prioritizing it and you're not scheduling it. But when in fact, that's what we always did before we started cohabitating with somebody.
Oh, that's
it's not spontaneous, people.
Sometimes I think too, it's like this idea of sex becomes an expectation in and of itself. And this is maybe a question for Dr. Hauser, but what I've had to tell myself sometimes is like, just get out of your head and just do it and stop worrying about how good it needs to be or what it's going to look like and just like roll with it. You know, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I do a lot of work with this. Of like some people will describe like it just takes a while for me to get even my head wrapped around the idea of this is going to happen, or do I want to do this? But once we get there, I'm like, okay, it's kind of like exercising. Once you get there, you don't regret it most of the times. Then it's really just a matter of what is the hang up of it. I've had some clients that it needs to happen almost as soon as they get home from work, because once they disrobe and get into the comfy stuff and get into the routine, then it's going to be 10 times harder to get back into it. So that's what they do. They try to figure, they get a sitter if they have kids at that time or whatever. You have to work with what you're doing. I've also had people do like a dump, like a to-do dump of a journal that you do in your kitchen of all the things that are in your mind. And so that you walk into the bedroom if that's where you're going to have sex, and it's all left outside of it so that you can release it and start associating your body with that. But I think also, I never tell clients to just make yourself do it. I actually don't think that's a good message to give. But I do think it's great to remind yourself for the times that it's really good. And that there's a lot you can do sexually that isn't penetrative. And that's fun too, like to look at different ways of touching each other and different ways of having pleasure that you're receiving and giving. And sometimes that is better. And it's easier to get into it than just thinking we're getting ready to do it.
I think I want to piggyback on that because I am always worried that people are going to misinterpret that. Exactly that. It's like, they just say I should do it. If you do it because you should, because somebody else is expecting it, because it's what you're supposed to do, that's not where orgasm and pleasure comes from. You're going to do it because you're like, I care about sensuality and sexuality in my life, so I'm going to do this now. It's kind of where you come from when you're going to do it, not this like should pushing resistance. And that's really, really important, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Jerry,
so
can I
it's about taking care of yourself first. Mm-hmm. And so what if you don't have a partner? If you're celibate, you should still take care of your pleasure, right? And so self-pleasure is really okay. And we should think about that as being a normal part of enjoying ourselves. And in order to take care of ourselves, we also, we tell young girls, look, you should be thinking about your skin, right? This is an organ of your body, and you should be taking care of all your skin so that you feel healthy, and that when you pleasure yourself, that skin maintains its integrity. But we know there are lots of women and men who are celibate, and they should still enjoy their sexuality. So that's one of the messages that we share.
I have a question for you, Jerry. We were talking earlier, Dr. Vonda and I, about sex and policy. So when it comes to the products that you've created and the companies that you founded and the work that you're doing for women and sexual health, are these products covered by insurance? And if not, how do we push to make policy changes? Because as we all know, Viagra has been covered forever. So can we talk a little bit about that?
Well, we obviously do need to work on that area, and the products that we have, which are the one of which is 510K cleared, some plans will give you coverage for over-the-counter products. So it really is plan dependent, but we obviously need to lobby for more of that.
That's really good to know. Just something else to keep in mind why we all need to get out and vote.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Access is really important.
Yes.
Can you prescribe that as a urologist? I mean, I'm asked to prescribe various, anti-inflammatory creams and things that traditionally weren't covered by insurance. And, we tried it anyway. Do you prescribe that and it gets paid for?
Well, I think just to clarify for people, doctors can prescribe whatever the heck they want. Insurance doesn't have to cover any of it, right?
True.
So just because I prescribe something doesn't mean your insurance is going to cover it. And in all fairness to sexual equality, many insurance plans don't cover Viagra. So I want to be very clear on like what this complete inequality of like, no. If they say they don't cover sexual medicine products, then they tend to not cover for male or female. What is very upsetting to me is when insurance companies call vaginal estrogen a sexual product. Vaginal estrogen as a prescription is not a sexual product. Yes, it can make sex more comfortable, better moisture, but it is for the health and integrity of that organ system. So that'll get me on my soapbox super quick when it gets refused for that. But for the most part, vaginal estrogen is covered by insurance.
So, when we began this discussion, Juliana, I had asked Kelly, well, I had asked all of us, I said, we're going to create the talk. Right? We have a talk or we may or may not have a talk when we're teenagers, and we definitely don't get a talk when we're 40, 50, 60. So if we're going to create the talk, and, Kelly gave us 4 or 5 points from your perspective, what are the priorities for the talk for women of our ages?
I believe, one of the things as we age, and we hear this a lot, is like, it just feels so good to know yourself better. And that's one of the gifts of aging. And our sexual self should be a huge part of what we're getting to know. That we should be able to take the time to rid ourselves of the shame and guilt that we were given along the way, that we've dragged along to where we are in our journey. And that it's time to release ourselves from that. And then as we're doing that, to also celebrate. We don't have a culture that allows us to high five each other when we've had a great sexual experience. And honestly, I think we should. I think we should be able to say to each other, like, this was horrible. Please hold me. I'm crying over this experience. And would you please, I just had the best sex of my life last night. That was incredible. And that should equally be okay for us. For those of us, those who are partnered up, when you get partnered, we get even quieter about the good stuff. It's disrespectful to our partner to say things that aren't going well and things that are going great. Like, we don't talk about that. So we are losing practice of knowing how to have sexual words come out of our mouths, knowing how to conceptualize it and talk about it and support each other. So I would say we have to create a community that, it doesn't have to be everybody. I'm kind of one of those people that if you sit next to me somewhere, I'm probably going to be talking about sex or it's going to be coming up, but we don't have to all be like that. But we should have people in our lives that are safe to us, that we can say the good and the hard, because you never know when you're going to have either. And that we are that person for other people. We seek that out and we are proactive. It's time for us at this point in our lives to not waste this time and say, I want to talk about this. Or do you? And I'll be there for you. You be there for me when that time comes. And then I think it's also like, I know we've all been saying this, that we weren't properly sex educated. I think it is crucial to really understand the intricacies of, especially of female anatomy and how that relates to pleasure, to sexual pleasure. We're just not given that information, and we should have it. We should know it, and we should know it on our own body. I also think that we should be able to ask our medical providers to go through our own anatomy with us and point it out to us, to say, this is where my clitoris is. It is still surprising how many people that I come across 40 on up who have no idea the difference between where they urinate and where the clitoris is. It is still very common for that. And then also, like, just checking, like looking at your cervix or talking about the health of your vaginal canal, just in general, having someone go through that with you and advocating for that and finding providers that will do that with you. I think that should be a part of our sex talk also. And then going back to what Kelly was saying, which is we shouldn't do things we don't want to. We should have the words and to be working on communicating with others on how, and if we're partnered up, to say, this is what I want, this is what I don't want, and feel comfortable and empowered and in agency as we say that. And that starts with knowing yourself. What is a yes and what's a no? I love using the word yuck and yum, knowing what your yucks and your yums are, and having relationships that respect that. That want you to have that kind of voice, and in fact find that sexy. Like, I love the campaign, that consent is sexy. That is also in committed relationships too. There should be consent in committed relationships, just like there are in a one night stand. And but we have to take responsibility for that as well.
There is so much wisdom and goodness here. And I hope that the people are listening, and I mean, people will have the opportunity. I hope they just come back multiple times and really absorb it, because once, after a lifetime of feeling a certain way about this area of our lives, is just not going to be enough. And I'm wondering, we're talking tomorrow about the 6 pillars of health: social, mobility, smart nutrition, detox, sleep and restoration. And we threw on there financial health, because there's so much data that being financially sound is a pillar of health. But I'm wondering, I know what your opinion is. I wonder if there's data to support maybe sexuality is the 7th pillar of health, because it impacts so much. What are your thoughts on that? Should we include it? And when we don't include it in studies like the blue zones, is it because we didn't ask?
Yes. I'm going to join on your soapbox that you were talking about earlier. That's my soapbox, that it absolutely should be. And I've been doing a lot of work lately about the commonalities between the conversations we have about money, like we do about sex, and how people respond to both. And I know that's not revolutionary, but I started replacing, just using the words and the sentences that people use, and having people guess, was this about money or about sex? And often they're guessed incorrectly. But we have the same kind of reticence or impoliteness or awkwardness, or like, that's just, you don't share that. It's like, oh, and it's like, no, we should be able to say these things, and we should be around people that are doing that as well. And I do think that it should be another pillar. It's a big yes for me.
Mm-hmm.
We should be teaching our daughters about this. So I say, teach your daughters well. I'm going to borrow a line from an old rock and roll group, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Teach your daughters well. Their vaginal vulvar health will slowly go by. Hand them a mirror. Have them go into the bathroom. Have them take a look. They shouldn't be embarrassed about their vaginal and vulvar areas. They should understand what their areas of pleasure are. We should also teach them what is right and what is wrong in terms of touching, in terms of the inappropriateness of certain types of behavior. Vaginas aren't stinky that need to be perfumed and washed and soaked. So starting these conversations early gets young women, into the mindset of feeling that this is really good. This is part of, I call it my sacred feminine. This is part of my sacred feminine. And I am proud of who I am as a woman. When young girls were interviewed in one study, most of them put this in the context of how their partner would feel about them. So they thought about, well, my vagina is stinky. My vagina needs to be healthy because I want to be a good mother. I want to be a good sexual partner, instead of thinking, I want to be healthy. I want these tissues to remain healthy. It's for me, not necessarily for my partner. So we need to impart that knowledge, that wisdom, and empower young girls to start thinking about this vaginal and vulvar health early on, if we're to help them to feel good about themselves and their sexuality.
Yeah, I always say there's a difference between selfishness and self-interested. You need to be self-interested. You need to want to take care of yourself, and then you can lend your gifts to the world. So I think that's a really good point you just made.
You know what, Kelly? I even think, you and I have been to medical school, and I don't even remember lectures on this at all. I mean, you probably do because you did a whole residency, but I think, just thinking who's going to have these conversations? We have generations of women who don't know. If a woman wants to go in her musculoskeletal visit, wants me to go over it with her, I'm happy to draw her a picture. But I think doctors in general receive very little education during standard medical school. Even like, who's going to teach the mothers to teach the daughters? What are your thoughts, Kelly?
Yeah, we have a lot of work to do. I agree with you completely. Even a lot of urologists, I just saw a lady yesterday who saw her gynecologist, they're supposed to be the bosses, and no disrespect, they're busy people. Like, adding sexual health on top of what a gynecologist already does, like, those doctors are already breaking at the back for how much work they do. But point being, she came to see me yesterday. She saw a gynecologist 2 weeks ago and was told her vulva was normal. Now, here's a woman who's having burning with peeing. She has itchiness. Her vulva's red and raw. And I'm like, there's nothing normal about this vulva at all. But it's like, somebody's got to know if your vulva is doing well, right? Like, a doctor has to know that. And then just to bounce on what Juliana said about money, I actually have a podcast on sex and money, because you can literally exchange the thoughts about sex and money, and they're interchangeable. I couldn't agree with it more. And same with exercise. I think a lot of our thoughts and beliefs about exercise and sex are the same. And really teaching us to own our agency. Like, I see women, sexually confident women, they're unstoppable. Because they know what they want. They know how to ask for what they want. Like, the skills you learn in learning about your sexual health will launch you into success everywhere else in life. And so I truly believe it is a foundational piece of women having their own agency and having life happen for them instead of having life happen to them.
So this is a huge part of having your voice. Because women are rising, right? I mean, it's remarkable. When women's health conversations started almost 10 years ago, one of the pillars was women didn't even know that we control 80% of all the health care decisions in this country. And when we're not rising yet, it is remarkable too, because women were like, I'm that powerful. I mean, in our first live conferences, it's remarkable in the last couple of years, women rising. And what you're saying is that this conversation is a huge part of continuing to rise and having a voice, maybe even corporately. When you're confident in your own skin, in your own house, then you can be more confident in public. You don't have to, you will not allow people to attribute a bad day to your menstrual cycle. I mean, I say that in public. I say that when I talk to women in business, I say, do not allow people to assign your work or write off your work. Oh, you must be having your period. It's none of their business. I don't say to the men, oh, how's your prostate today? But for generations, we have allowed that kind of conversation. So I wonder, look at me, get all riled up. I wonder if this is part of the bigger conversation of women rising.
It's definitely feminism in the workplace. And I just did a conversation with a group of women entrepreneurs on feminism in the workplace. And everything, I totally support everything that you're saying. And we look at what's happened during this pandemic, for example, and how women have been challenged and how they have retreated in large numbers. And that needs to stop, because they are taking on more responsibilities, 5 hours a day on average, in addition to juggling other responsibilities in the workplace. And they're not taking care of themselves. They're taking care of everyone but themselves. So this is another conversation around feminism and feminism in the workplace and feminism as it pertains to our self-care.
Yeah. And I think also recognizing the collective and not just the individual in this conversation as well, because I do think a lot of these changes have to happen on a systemic level and on a policy level. And that takes all of us from all these different walks of life, however we identify as women or however we live as women, to come together and recognize our collective power. And to your point, I think that starts in that foundational space of knowing yourself and your body and being willing to say, this is who I am. This is my sexual self. This is what I want. This is what I need. And also recognizing, I think it's important. And I teach all like the younger women that I talk to that like no is a complete sentence and you don't need to explain anything after you say the word no either. So there is that. That's empowering in and of itself.
It is. Well, I love talking to the five of you. I think we could go on. And frankly, I think in the future when Women's Health Conversations has more mini summits, we should do one completely for hours on these topics. It's really important. So Gerianne DiPiano from FemPharma, Dr. Kelly Casperson, urologist and life coach, host of You Are Not Broken and the book soon to come out, and Dr. Juliana Hauser, America's Sexpert, and of course, Natalie Bencivenga, my good friend, a clinical social worker and journalist. I'm thrilled to death to start out this conference, the best of life, talking about the best of relationships, the best of sex, the best of technology, and what's hot for your health. So thank you so much for joining me tonight. I appreciate your time so much.
Thanks, Vonda.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks for coming, ladies. And so as we continue, I wanted to tell you about something really exciting that we're doing during this summit. You know, you might have not have been around or known of the last 3 mini summits that we've had. Women's Health Conversations is a nonprofit that's all about educating smart, savvy women on how to prioritize your bodies, your brains, and your bliss. And like I said, we've been around about 10 years. We have thousands and thousands of women looking at our website, on our 2 Facebook pages, on our Instagram. But I thought in this time that we're all going through COVID, that we needed to touch base some more. So we've had 3 mini summits. We had one called Ageless. All of these have been produced on our podcast, which is called Hot for Your Health. It drops every Thursday. So we had a mini summit on being ageless. We then had a mini summit called 40-ish, because as the millennials are turning 40, there's a lot to reaching this most remarkable prime time, 30 or 40 years of our lives. And then we just recently, the last mini summit we had was on living in prime time, what to do with 50, 60 and beyond. And it's all culminated in this Best of Life Summit. But even as we're so digitally connected, even as we've done our best not to get zoomed out, sometimes even with digital connection, we're actually lonely in a crowd, and we crave what we saw tonight, which is really deep conversations, amazing human interaction, and a community. More than anything, Women's Health Conversations is about community of smart, savvy, like-minded women. We are all in the passionate pursuit of the best of life. So what I've decided to do, and we're launching it during this summit, is really offer the opportunity to women like you and me who want to go deeper. We want to know the truth. We don't want to just read magazines and try to figure this all out. We want experts to tell us how to pursue the best of life. So we're making a community called Ageless, Authentic, and Indefinable. And as we go through this summit, you'll see how we are really exploring all these topics. And so I'm going to make a big announcement about that tomorrow, but I just wanted to introduce you to the idea of this amazing community that we're building that is launching tomorrow, actually. So I am so thankful for our 4 speakers. I'm so thankful for Natalie, who's a journalist, to really dig deep with me. I'm thankful for Kelly Casperson, who's a urologist and life coach. And you are going to learn so much from her when you go look at her online. I'm so thankful for Juliana Hauser, who I have implemented so many of the things that I've learned from her in conversations within my own marriage. And finally, Gerianne DiPiano from FemPharma, because the changes that happen in menopause are real and they can hit you on the side of the head when estrogen walks out the door. So I'm really thankful that they've taken the time to develop products for this stage of life. But right now, our last segment that we're going to pop to really is going to talk more about this idea of FemPharma and how few products are being focused on this critical prime time, 30 or 40 years of life, and the organization that is helping to elevate the conversation. I'm going to bring on a pre-recorded video with Denise Pines, who is a journalist, a producer, an entrepreneur, and now a researcher who has really coined the term FemAging and has done research to find out what women in prime time want and what products are available and what venture capital is doing to support that. So we're going to bring you this pre-recorded segment, and then I'll be back to close us out. Welcome back to Women's Health Conversations Best of Life Summit. And we are so excited to close the Friday night session with a person that is just doing amazing things. Denise Pines is not only a producer, a media celebrity, she is an inventor, an entrepreneur, and she has started a movement that you need to know about because she's serving women like you and me all over the country and the world. And it's called FemAging. She's trademarked that word, and a group and conference called Wise Pause. So Denise, welcome to Women's Health Conversations.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
You know, there is so much to pack into the time we have, and I know we'll be back again and again. And ladies, if you want more, I actually interviewed Denise on the Hot for Your Health podcast, so you can get more information if you want to touch up. But Denise, just tell us, what is FemAging, and what are the numbers surrounding why this is so important?
Oh, absolutely. So historically, women's health has traditionally focused on fertility, pregnancy, and period, right?
Yeah.
So we set out to discover, how do we go beyond fertility and influence the care of women in their post-child rearing years from a health innovation, a research, and also a clinical practice perspective, because all of those three areas are completely lacking. So we identified, introduced, and defined a new industry, one called FemAging, and then FemAging tech, which includes innovations that are traditional and somewhat not traditional, but they are all specifically focused on women who are aged 40 plus, because that's where we tend to see in this area called FemTech, a lack of solutions and growing solutions in that area. So these can be innovations that are software, devices, diagnostic tools, nutraceuticals, wearables, of course, pharmaceuticals, because we're not, opposed to that, and clothing, which we tend not to find. And for women, skincare solutions. So we are focused on, how do we create a roadmap to increase the innovation as well as increase the investment into these areas, right? So to support these innovators when they have these great ideas. So what we've done in that respect, in terms of to increase both the innovation and the investors, is we've created a conversation that we're going to have May 20th, where we've partnered with Keiretsu Forum, which is the largest investment network organization in the world, to help bring investors together, and also venture capitalists, so angel and venture, to look at, during a pitch competition, innovators in this area. So we've kind of first started off by creating a report to give people the data and the information. And then we started having these conversations. And then we went and partnered with the other side of this, the investment side of this. And now we're wanting to bring the investment side and the innovators together so people can see the breadth and depth of the innovation that one can do. I mean, like you are working on numerous innovations, right? That help this group, but really all women and men too.
You know, sometimes we think we're alone in a crowd. Like when I reached 40 and now 50 and beyond, I thought I knew I wasn't the only one that had new adventures to live through, but I hadn't talked to anybody about it. But when you really look at, there are 3.8 billion women in the world, and at least 40% of us are 40 and over. It's probably like 50, 60. So it's like most people are being served by what you're doing. So why don't women ask for what they want, in your opinion? And what can they do if they have an idea like, you know what, I'm tired of X and so happening. How do I get a product for that? I mean, how can consumer women like me influence the market?
You know, so it's a good question. It's actually two questions. So what happens to women? What really happens is that we are nowhere in our life actually educated unless you are a doctor like you who intentionally go into this practice. There is no place in the K through 12 anymore. And of course, as we become adult, where we're actually taught about the evolution of our physical human state along this life journey that we're going to have, right? So from 0 being born to 120 potentially dying, right? That there's nowhere where we can sort of go, oh, I'm now hitting 40. What are the things that come with this part of my aging, right? And where then I'm not surprised because I have consciousness, there's data, there's information, there's solutions for me to just, go once I hit that. And so because there's nothing, and because I think also that women during this perimenopause phase, which are the years leading up to menopause, they still have a period. And so when they still have this period, they don't think menopause. They don't think I'm having menopausal symptoms. The only thing could be when you might have some, hot flashes, or you might have continuous night sweats. And then you might start Googling. And then you'll start seeing terms like perimenopause or menopause associated with those outcomes. But prior to that, you really don't. So you could be having incontinence where you laugh and tingle or cry and tingle or sneeze and tingle, but you're not really connecting that as that might be perimenopausal. Or your hair starts all of a sudden shedding and you're not connecting that as perimenopausal. And so you might let too much time go with your hair shedding, where if you had recognized like, oh, this may be menopausal, let me go to the doctor now, and as opposed to waiting 7 years and now your hair is so thin, you're looking for a miracle at this point, right? And so I think that's what really, really happens. In terms of the second part of your question is, what can health practitioners do? I think health practitioners actually see you are the solution creators. You understand the body. You have the patients. You have the research in your clinic and what you constantly are seeing. And you are probably the best to create solutions. And I think definitely more women need to create solutions because they'll create solutions and devices that are functional and comfortable, right? All of these devices that a lot of times that we see that women have to endure, like the mammogram. I'm like, I know a man created the mammogram.
Or the speculum.
Oh my gosh.
Speculum.
Because there's no way a man would let his penis go onto a pizza glass and get smashed. There's no way, right? There has to be a better way. Why hasn't someone developed cups that a woman goes up to a machine, the cups come and they can really look at the entire, have to be all squeezed up, right? And so I really am now starting to advocate for young, K through 12 to start, learning the sciences. But what we have to do is bridge why we want them to learn to what they can solve, right? I don't think we do a good job in the STEM area of talking about why to what you can solve in society, right?
Oh, I love that, Denise, to make it so relevant at every age.
Yes.
That's so exciting. Well, the women that are listening live with us, the women that are going to be listening remotely and virtually from now and forever, I want you to look up FemAging. I want you to look up Wise Paws and Denise Pines. And if you are an angel investor, if you are someone with networks and the capacity and the drive to change our environment, you should join with us through Denise's organization and through Women's Health Conversation, because there are 3.8 million of us in this world. And we're always the solvers, we're the fixers. So Denise, I'm so glad you came today to introduce us.
Yes.
Work.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I always enjoy talking to you, Dr. Vonda Wright.
Well, I can't wait to see what you're going to do. So I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. Wow, I just think it gets better and deeper. And if you are an angel investor, get on Denise Pine's site and she will tell you where the innovation is happening. It's amazing. Literally, there are only $400 million of investment is being spent on a demographic that controls $20 trillion. So, this women 40, 50, 60 and beyond are the most powerful generation in the history of this planet because of where we are today. And so what Women's Health Conversations has been doing for 10 years and what we'll continue to do is amplify our ability to change not only our health, but the health of everyone we touch in our homes, in our work, in our communities. And in doing so, I believe that Women's Health Conversations and summits like this will play a huge role in changing our country's health, our culture, and even our economy. So I hope you enjoyed this first session of the Best of Life Summit, where we're talking about the best of relationships, the best of sex, the best of technologies for women. Tomorrow is our huge extravaganza. We actually have 3 sessions tomorrow. Session 1 is starting at 10 o'clock. It is focusing on the whole woman. And what do I mean by that? Sometimes when we go to the doctor, we're treated like a body part. Oh, my knee hurts. Well, it must only be your knee. Or, oh, I have a headache. It must only be your head. We are an entire ecosystem, and we must be approached as a whole person. So section 1, we're talking about the approach to the whole woman. We're hearing from a very a celebrity woman who has her own health story to tell and how she is treated like the whole woman. We're talking with a celebrity cardiologist about the #1 killer of women in this country. And then we're talking about access to care. And then in the afternoon, after lunch, our second session on Saturday is talking about the 6 pillars of health: finance, rest and restoring, movement, smart nutrition, all those things that are foundational to our lifestyle. In our third session in the afternoon, we're talking about truly the best of life and being ageless. We're talking about ageless beauty. We're talking about menopause. We're talking more about pain and how not to be in it, time management, all those things that we're encountering in this amazing 30 or 40 years of our lives. And I'm introducing a concept to you called precision longevity. You may not realize this, but in addition to being an orthopedic surgeon, I'm also a scientist, and I'm developing a program where we are implementing personalized preventive health. So you're not going to want to miss that. And I'm going to detail this amazing new community called Ageless, Authentic, and Indefinable that's launching tomorrow to really connect us, because even in a digital age, we can be lonely in a crowd and we need a community. And then finally on Sunday afternoon from 1 to 3, we're getting into the real authenticity and indefinability and talking about healing and how authenticity is your superpower. So I know that was a lot, but you are not going to want to miss this. So if your friends want to listen in, there's still time to register, because we are going to make this content available all summer long. It's going to be your summer viewing project, because it's just too important not to. So anyway, I'm thankful you've been here tonight. I hope you have a fabulous Friday night, and I'll see you tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Bye now.